rehab, so there was spinal injuries. And I had just gotten these $1,000 prescription Gucci glasses. And this poor guy, so they often give them drugs to relax their bowels, to not put pressure on their spines and things like that. And he was laying flat, took him for a shower. Now, I have been quite good in my placements to palm off a lot of the ADLs to the carers, but this one I had to do. And anyway, long story short, showering him, he lets go of his bowels, and I'm talking a mountain of this wet stuff. And I leaned down to clean it up, and my $1,000 glass falls in the middle of it. I just stared at them, and I took a moment. I was like, how much do I want these glasses back? I ended up having to medically sanitize them about 5 times, but I tell you what, the first time I put them back on my face, I gagged so badly, and I've never forgotten that. I'll ask you a question and I'll tell the story. So how big do you think a male scrotum can get?
Oh, I've seen a male scrotum that looks like a rugby ball.
Yes. Well, this guy, it was a bowling ball pretty much, I would say. So this guy had fluid overload. It's all going to extremities. The thing with this patient, this is the only, so my mother, little quick backstory, my mother used to work for White Lady Funerals. So I used to, my neighbour was a forensic scientist. I have no problem with death. Palliative care was fine for me, all that sort of stuff. So the only death that has ever bothered me was this guy. And it was because the poor guy was mentally disabled as well. So he had an intellectual learning disability. And I was the one that walked in as a student. So I watched him on the Friday, thought his scrotum was it was a bit big, it was the size of a golf ball, let someone know. Long story short, come back to the Monday, hadn't been a lot of care in that weekend. I was the one that noticed that it was huge. It was absolutely, you had to put a bluey under it, people on either side, put him in the wheelchair to hold his ball sack because it was that big. And he started to get multiple organ failure. And the problem with this guy is I met called him. And so because I was a student, but I'd done the met call, I got to stay the whole time. It was a long met call, 2-3 hours. And this poor guy, he was looking at me. His eyes were focused on me as he was dying. And he just looked at me and he kept just saying, thank you. And he's like, thank you. Thank you. And I was like, no, we're here. We're doing everything we can. And he's like, thank you for helping. Thank you for saving me. He just thanked me for 3 hours as he died.
Gee. They couldn't give him for...
Oh, they did everything. They did frusemide, they did potassium. They had 7 doctors trying to do ultrasound to get lines in because his veins were collapsing. Yeah. He ended up going to a vegetative state, and he actually ended up dying a bit later that day. But
How old was he?
Oh, I would have said late 20s, and he had a wife that was also disabled, and she'd only just been visiting him then. And it was just a very prolonged, slow death. And the whole time he never stopped thanking me. And I was like, he just doesn't understand what's happening. Yeah. And that broke my heart. So, so placement was very interesting. But I do deal with that stuff pretty well. Palliative, we had obviously so many pass away. That doesn't bother me at all, but death's part of life. But that one, just because he didn't get what was going on.
Conversations with Nurses is proudly sponsored by Fat Burners Only, Australia's #1 online supplement store. Nursing is a demanding job and requires your body to be in tip-top condition. So why not head to Fat Burners Only, Australia's go-to store for supplements online. FBO provides you with a full range of supplements to support your hectic lifestyles and, of course, the energy and focus you need for those long shifts. FBO has Australia-wide free express shipping so your products arrive at your door faster. And as a special treat for our listeners, enter the code NURSES at the checkout to receive 10% off every order, with proceeds going towards supporting this very podcast. Look good, feel great, and operate at peak performance with Fat Burners Only. Proudly supporting nurses in association with your #1 nursing podcast, Conversations with Nurses.
Got me. But interesting, there was a very hectic met call. They had so many doctors, very interesting to see how it unfolds. You've got the team. They ended up having to pull so many in. Literally all of his veins, they couldn't get lines in. They had ultrasounds in. I never knew how much potassium is so controlled because of, obviously now I know why. But it was just a phenomenal process to try and save this guy. That was interesting. But the scrotum part, I've never seen. They couldn't get his penis inverted, his other ball sack went into the one ball sack. I've just never seen the human body distort so much.
I tell you what I saw as big as a rugby ball as well was a girl's ovarian cyst.
Wow.
I was working in Melbourne in a hospital, very young, probably 19, 20, thin, you wouldn't have known. And all she said was, I just noticed I put on a bit of fat around my waist. And then it was getting painful to sit down. Every time she sat down, she got pain shooting up through her. Went to the doctor. We ended up taking her to theatre, and her ovarian cyst was the size of a rugby ball. It was massive. It just pushed all her organs out of the way, basically, as it grew.
That's crazy. Wow.
She was very lucky.
Oh, wow.
If that had burst, it
Yeah.
would have been agony for her.
Was the fertility gone, though?
She still had one ovary.
The other one still had, yeah.
I think she was going to be all right.
Rough, yeah.
So we do find some amazing things in people's bodies, or their bodies are amazing that they can do such things like grow the size of a rugby ball.
Yeah, well, it's like the pregnancies you hear that people don't know they're pregnant until they're 8 months because it's just all up in there.
Long toenails, pus, vomit. Anything else that makes you gag?
It's so interesting to know what nurses' icks are, because someone will hate blood, someone will hate poo, someone will hate pus. I love blood. Love it.
So do I.
Poo, I'm so desensitized to, no problem. Eat, you're fine. Vomit, yeah, not great.
No.
I had this lady that in the rehab, she had just had both her knees amputated due to diabetic issues. Didn't learn a lesson, kept Uber eating butter chicken to her bed.
Ugh.
She had a CBC, like straight into her heart, threw up on it. I'm trying a delicate line that can go wrong, and I'm trying to clean the vomit chunks out of it. So that wasn't great. I would say borderline, but my one thing is pus. And I remember doing, I think it was day surgery unit, we did plastics, and the one thing I struggle with is to have the game face on sometimes, because I sometimes let my emotions come out.
The poker face.
Yeah, the poker face. I'm very bad at that. Anyway, so they let me into surgery. The guy's on his side. He's turned over. His face is away from me. He's got a mass on the back of his neck, and the surgeon just looks at me. So he's under a local, so he's still awake. I kind of forgot that fact. And the surgeon just looks at me and he's like, check this out. And he just stabs a needle in, and boom, it just pops out. This pus just shoots across the room near his chest. And I was like, ugh. And I was like, holy fuck. And this guy, the patient's like, what's wrong? And I was like, oh, nothing. It's all fine. It's fine. Yeah, crazy, disgusting. Can't stand pus.
But being able to relieve the pressure from a pussy.
No. I can't even pop someone else's pimples.
See, I can handle that. I can handle
disgusting.
Pus. But you know what I can't handle is suctioning someone's airway.
Oh, the mucus.
I work in anaesthetics, and we've got LMAs in, and they pull an LMA, which is a laryngeal mask, pull it out with all this mucus on it, or they put the sucker down there. I have to, again, poker face and look like I'm really concerned, but I'm dreaming away and I'm living in Spain somewhere away from here. I'm not listening to this.
So I've had a lot of experience in that area yet. I will say what tests your stomach is, and I'm so glad I got to see it, was when I did ortho-surge, I got to see a couple of live surgeries. That is like, so there's one where a guy had a real complex break, degeneration of the fibula and tibia, right? The surgeon just had to come and chip away. It didn't matter what he did, and then a robot would come and do the precision cuts.
Yeah.
But because it didn't matter what the surgeon did, he went to town with a chisel and a hammer, bone fragments like going across the room. They're in their moon suits, and like he's twisted this guy's leg and he's ripping inside, and I was just like, this is epic. Like the way that they get in there. And the same surgeon, the neck surgeon, was an infection on the bones. It was obviously anything bone related. And he's putting his fingers in there and he's sucking in. He's like I love watching that stuff. But I just passed.
Orthopedics was always one of my favourite. Hips and knee replacements and anything.
So full on.
Fractures and stuff like that.
I was like, no wonder they come into recovery so sore.
You talk about a moon suit, and to anybody that's listening and that doesn't know what it is, you have this special hat on, a big, like a frame on your head that you put on your head, don't
like
you?
Like an astronaut,
yeah. And there's a fan going on inside that, and then you've got this big shield that goes all the way over, so you're covered from head to toe.
It's like little blue astronauts because because apparently also because it's to the bone, the highest risk of infection, they have to, normal surgeons don't have half of that stuff on. It looks like you're walking in on little blue astronauts in the room. It's crazy.
On the moon shoot. Well, we had a surgeon that was operating and he sneezed. And his booger attached to the inside of his shield on his face and just swung there.
Like a little pickle in the window, sliding down.
And every time he breathed or spoke, it would just swing from side to side, and we are doing the old poker face. So we continued to operate and we got to the bit where he was sewing up, so he just sort of walked to the other side of the room, says to his assistant, I'll leave you to sew up because I feel socially compromised. Oh, we lost it. Everyone just roared laughing because we've been holding that in. You're trying to suppress this laughter. Your whole body's shaking. You're just about peeing your pants, but you can't do anything because you didn't know how he was going to react to this, but it was just this little swinging booger.
I feel like patients will never really understand the other side of it. Like these surgeons are in there from, all day. They do multiple, and so they don't realise. Obviously you're unconscious when all this is going on, but there's music playing, like there's humour, there's jokes. Like one of them like to play Nirvana all the time because they need whatever floats their boat to concentrate. But there is such a human factor in it.
Exactly.
And it's super interesting. I kept looking down at the patient. I was like, oh, yeah, he's definitely asleep. It's all good.
Well, this gorgeous orthopaedic surgeon I used to work with, we used to take CDs in. Well, I used to take my CDs, so it was Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin and Doors and Doobie Brothers, and he would turn it up, and he's banging away at the hip, whack, whack, putting the components in. And then the general surgeon next door came tapping on our window and he said, your music. And we go, oh, is it too loud? He goes, no, turn it up. Because he could hear the thumping away, but he couldn't hear the music. And so, turn it up.
Because it's such a clinical setting that you need something that I get it. I actually quite like theatre. My main focus would be like ED acute, but if I didn't do that, I would do theatre. I just think because it's just what you see and make it like as a nursing perspective, it can be a little bit repetitive and sterile, but I like the environment.
Well, it's not, yes, the standards and the setting up is repetitive and setting up your buckets and everything like that, but every operation is different.
Yeah.
Every surgeon is different.
Yeah. You
might work with one surgeon on Tuesdays, but Wednesday you're working with a different surgeon. You might be working neurology, you might work in orthopaedics, you're doing plastics, you're doing gynae, every day is different.
Yeah.
And that suits my personality, which is similar to what you said. You just need variety.
Yeah. Because it was interesting. Besides the theatre in that sense, I got to work a lot with doctors in a radiology prac, and it was all the spinal things. So seeing that, like the needles that they put in people's backs or the radio
pain.
Well, so they'd have like nerve damage and they'd have to sizzle off the nerve with radio frequency needles, and just seeing 6-inch thick needles get shot, like having the doctor literally jump their body weight onto it to get it down right next to your spinal cord was amazing. There's one poor guy, he was a fireman actually, and it was a workplace injury.
Yeah.
And for it to be covered, normally you would break this procedure up to do 3 one time and 3 another time, but he had to get all 6 done at once. To see what he had to go through for this was phenomenal. So like stuff like that is interesting. It keeps me
They have good result from it. I've worked with a lot of them in Perth, acute pain, what we call the acute pain. Who were you working with and where was that?
Capital Radiology at a bunch of different clinics. But, so it was one of my pracs in a lot of cardiac health, but also a lot of spinal issues. But, interesting. So just the way they do CT guided or ultrasound guided injections, steroids, but particularly searing nerve pains and stuff. And you'd see how close they get. One of them, would just go, he put a needle in and he's like, see that liquid coming out? That's a spinal fluid from your brain. And I was like, that's sick. That is so cool.
Like spinal taps.
Yeah, insane. And like under locals. I was like, oh. Well, still, ow.
We were talking about nursing courses. You were talking earlier how courses can be free in Melbourne. but not everywhere else. Do you think that making it more accessible to people because of the nursing shortages and lowering the aggregate to get into nursing